Hi everyone, my name is Gruia Bădescu and I will talk now about heritage and memory in an urban setting to highlight the frictions between imperial legacies and nation building. So what I'm going to do is we're going to address another thread of the PoSoCoMeS conference, which is the one directing us towards global perspectives, including post-colonial frames. So we'll investigate a bit how does that work with our own context in Central Eastern Europe. In 2018, several Central and Eastern European countries celebrated 100 years of either independence or unification on the ruins of disintegrating empires. In Romania, this marked the centennial of the Great Union, when the Old Kingdom united with, first of all, Bessarabia, part of the Tsarist Empire. Today, part of it is the Republic of Moldova, with Bukovina, part of Austria-Hungary, within Austria, and Transylvania, part of Austria-Hungary within Hungary. In the Romanian Centennial, there was no place more important than the city of Alba Iulia. On December 1st, 1918, took place the Great National Assembly of Transylvanian Romanians, when delegates coming from a variety of villages and towns all across Transylvania proper, Banat and Partium, provinces of Hungary, came to Alba Iulia, Gyulafervar, Weisburg, in order to express their desire to leave the Austro-Hungarian Empire and unite with the Kingdom of Romania through the Alba Iulia Declaration. December 1st is today the National Day of Romania. In Alba Iulia, residents and authorities alike are proud of their status in Romanian memory. As a result, they proclaim the city the other capital. But as you can see from the English translation, it is also the place of the largest citadel in Romania. The Alba Iulia citadel was the object of a comprehensive restoration process within the last 10 years, making it a rising star of Romanian tourism. Visitors to Alba Iulia in the last 10 years found not only a fully restored citadel, but also performances, including these reenactments, including Roman soldiers and also Habsburg soldiers referring to former imperial past. Yet the Memorial Act of 2018 and the heritage restoration that happened a decade before came to clash in unexpected ways. Here in the image, you see the plateau that was built in the 1920s for the coronation of King Ferdinand and Queen Mary of Romania, who came to achieve the unification in the newly built cathedral that you see in the center of the image. This plateau was built replacing a part of the Habsburg city walls in order to recenter the citadel on this act of the unification. However, in the process of restoring the Habsburg citadel, a decision was taken to actually remove that plateau in order to reshape the walls to the way they looked at their origin. As a result, this cathedral of coronation lost its centrality within the ensemble. So the spatial reconfiguration of Alba Iulia citadel brought in tension imperial heritage of the Habsburgs and national memory just in the eve of the centennial. So this is the puzzle from which this whole research endeavor begins. So what does Alba Iulia tell us about both imperial legacies and nation-building projects? Was there any intentionality behind it? Or even if it wasn't, what is the impact on the way we look at heritage of empire in Alba Iulia today? To explore these questions, we're going to first look at some frames about how to understand materiality of duress, what does Alba Iulia mean for different groups, and also what nation building meant for that space. But then we're going to concentrate mostly on the restoration of the Habsburg fortress and forms of depoliticized heritage and the politics of symbolic violence. The rehabilitation of the Habsburg citadel in Alba Iulia mirrors a number of processes occurring in Central and Eastern European context today. So there's a lot of talk today about the imperial nostalgia, about Habsburg nostalgia in particular, the Habsburg Empire being brought back to life through a series of artifacts, and there's a lot of work which I'm not going to focus on now. But I want to bridge a bit the debate with the global discussion on empire. For instance, the work of Anne Stoller regarding imperial duress. For Stoller, protracted imperial processes that saturate the subsoil of people's lives, which actually persist, are what she calls imperial duress. Imperial duress is a matter of artifacts, is a matter of heritage, is a matter of practice. But why is built heritage such a vector for imperial duress? Well, in my broader work, I investigate how architecture is a mnemonic tool. The connection between architecture and memory. So of course there's been a lot of interest in how places are mediators of memory, going away from the idea of space, place, and the city as being just a background of memory processes. So you have the important work of Ricoeur and Anita Bakshi and others who are actually looking at the topographies of memory. Similarly, I see heritage within the critical heritage scholarship, which kind of decouples it from the celebratory or the best practices approach in order to look at how heritage is produced and how is it received. And if you're interested in hearing more about how I connect our region with the imperial duress concept of Stoller, but also how I unpack these issues of heritage and memory in a more theoretical form, I recommend you to read my recent article, which appeared in Cultural Studies just this summer. But now that I understand a bit more about Alba Iulia is not only this Habsburg citadel, but actually represents a lieu de mémoire of two different nationalities coexisting in Transylvania. Let's start with the Romanians. As we already know, the Alba Iulia is the city of the Union, and by now we know about the Great Union of 1918. But in fact, there are other unions having taken place here. Centuries ago, there was the Union of Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania, under Michael the Brave, the ruler of Wallachia, which was the first time when the so-called Romanian-speaking principalities got united. So this also refers to another union, the Union of the Churches. In 1700, some representatives of the Orthodox Romanians decided to unite with Rome in order to get more political rights. Then in 1948, during the communist regime, actually, there was a so-called reunification of the Greek Catholic Church with the Orthodox Church, which was actually a political takeover. Alba Iulia is also connected with another lieu de mémoire, and that of the Romanian continuity. So this is a national obsession, how actually Romanized nations have created the Romanians and have lived in this space for thousands of years, and therefore Romanians in Transylvania had the rights to this province as being the first ones. And so the material remnants of Apulum as the largest Roman custom played a role in sustaining this narrative. But Alba Iulia is also connected with the narrative of previous suffering and national struggle. Romanians in Transylvania were mostly serfs. For religious reasons, they did not have equal powers for a number of centuries. And then this peasantry rebelled against mostly Hungarian and German-speaking overlords. And then 1784 became an important device also for the Romanian nation in the 20th century, but also for the communist regime to show the idea of struggle and continuous struggle in Transylvania and beyond. So basically, as one of my interlocutors, an architect participating into the reconstruction of Alba Iulia citadel, pointed out, this is the city that most reflects Romanian history, from the Romans to today. Compared to Alba Iulia, even Bucharest is nothing. So Alba Iulia is a sacred place of the nation. Gyulafehérvár, which is the Hungarian name for Alba Iulia, is also very important for Hungarians. So this is the city of Gyula, one of the original leaders of the Carpathian Basin province. Then this is the city of the cathedral, a Roman Catholic cathedral that is very old, the oldest structure remaining in the citadel. And this is also the burial place of Transylvania's princes, mostly coming from Hungarian aristocratic. Gyulafehérvár was also the capital of the Principality of Transylvania, which was ruled by Hungarian elites when Buda, for instance, was under the Ottomans after Hungary's occupation. So this also is connected with the golden age of Transylvania. So this is a very important part of the Hungarian memory of Transylvania, the place where they continued as a political entity, but also a place of great cultural innovation. Yet the materiality of the place is dominated, obviously, by the Habsburg past, by this Vauban citadel. Yet part of this Habsburg past was put under dynamite in 1921 in order to prepare the plateau of the coronation of Ferdinand and Mary. So for about a century, the citadel had as a centerpiece its coronation, the Coronation Cathedral. The 1920s Coronation Cathedral brought architectural language from south of the Carpathians, from Wallachia, as it replicates somehow the Târgoviște princely church, while next to it lies the early medieval Catholic church associated with the Hungarian community. The reshaping of Alba Iulia's urban space continued the nation-building process. In 1929, a new plan was approved, which included a development axis that started from the Union Hall, where the Union was signed, passed by the Orthodox Cathedral, and then went towards the western mountains, the Apuseni Mountains, which are a stronghold of the Romanian national movement. So the Coronation Cathedral will be then the central element of the new city. That was continued actually by the communist regime after its takeover in the 1940s. While originally they built a modern block just in front of the Coronation Cathedral, as you can see on the images on the left. On the image on the right, you see a very expensive operation that took place in the 1980s in order to actually remove the blocks by setting them apart and being transported or translated. And this operation also signals a change in how the communist regime actually relates to the national history. So in fact, many talk about the latter part of communist Romania as being of a national communism regime in which nationalist myths and memory come to the forefront together with Marxist ideology. So it really creates an intriguing mix. In the communist period, aside from erecting a statue to Michael the Brave, there was no actual major interventions within the citadel. In fact, the citadel remained in a quite deteriorated shape, and this is endured in the transition period until the process of restoration began. The restoration of the Habsburg fortress was initiated and actually carried through by the city hall of Alba Iulia, with a number of local actors involved. It is important to also mention that most of the people who worked in the plans, but also the execution of the works, were actually from Alba Iulia, which is quite rare in the way that the bids are being given. And I interviewed a number of these actors, both from Alba Iulia, but also from ministries and various international organizations that actually funded these projects. I'm not going to describe here the complexity of the issue. I'll just highlight a number of points. The first is that actually the city hall and the city manager, in particular, talked that the decision to actually highlight the citadel as citadel restoration as an important act was in order to make Alba Iulia stand for what it has as a comparative advantage, as Alba Iulia was overshadowed by neighbors such as Cluj or Sibiu, cities with powerful economic development. So heritage was seen as a way of getting to tourism, and then as a way of getting to economic development. In terms of actually decisions to actually implement the restoration, including the destruction of the plateau, the city manager said heritage is a matter of technical expertise. We let the professionals do their work. The technical report written by the heritage professionals actually argued that the citadel's touristic potential is significantly diminished by the discontinuity of the western wing, and that led to the restoration of the moat the way it was before the Yorga plan of the 1920s. So, according to the city manager, the only stakeholder who actually opposed the project to redo the walls and moats was the Orthodox Church. The Archbishop was mainly concerned by the lack of a bridge that would fall perpendicular to the altar and thus maintaining the unification axis. According to the city manager, the mayor assured the Orthodox Bishop that a new bridge will be built as a separate project, so the church accepted the rehabilitation project. Yet there were other sources that indicated that actually it was a matter of bargaining between the Ministry of Culture, at the time run by the Hungarian Democratic Party of Romania, and which actually gave money to the church, and the acceptance of this particular deal. In any case, the matter of heritage specialists working on the project was contested by a number of local voices, including university professors and civic activists, who said that the problem would not be necessarily the walls, but various works done within the citadel, in which parts in new interventions, including a pavilion over the Roman ruins, a number of new sculptures being inserted, really were detrimental to the character of this heritage place. Let us now turn to the architects who designed and carried out a number of the works, both of the restoration but also the interventions within the citadel. There are a number of critics who pointed out that actually they were not heritage specialists, they were architects working with new interventions normally, so they were not entitled to take part in this. However, the architects I talked to and to part in this pointed out that they've done a number of historical studies, that they have been following this, and they worked actually on heritage preservation for a while, also within the city hall from the 1980s onward. With regards to the decision to return the western section to its original Habsburg shape, one of the main actors in this decision told me that the Vauban fortress represents a solid legacy of 300 years of organization, which is opposed to the traditional disorganization of Romania's non-Habsburg south and east, Wallachia and Moldavia. In this view, the demolition of the citadel to favor Romanian nationalism back in the 1920s was a breach in a stable system of a powerful, well-organized empire. In fact, using technical, neutral terms of restorations, the architect's choice of favoring the reconstruction of a particular time echoes imperial nostalgia. It reveals also how the Vauban-style citadel has become a marker of Europeanness, of order and discipline, brought in opposition to a perceived takeover by a form of local peasant nationalism, people who took part in the 1918 delegations, and also a Balkan dysfunctional statelet. These architects' words echo the familiar tropes of Balkanism, what Maria Todorova gave as an answer to Orientalism when talking about the European situation, in which Europe, in this case also Central Europeans, built Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, as somehow an incomplete other, a place of half European values, a place that never reached enlightenment, and a place that somehow doesn't have the organizational skills that the rest of Europe is. The citadel is a symbol of Europe, and the Romanian unification is a symbol of a takeover by a corrupt, dysfunctional Balkan state. What we see here is a clash of two different forms of communicative and cultural memory. One, the one of the elites, privilege the empire as a form of modernity, but also of Europeanness. The other one, the one of celebrating the Centennial, privileges self-determination as somehow a struggle of emancipation for an imagined oppressed group. However, both of them go into forms of discrimination and exclusion. The first one, through its Balkanist tropes, creates a form of exclusion of Balkanness and Southeast Europeanness within the nation, while the other one, obsessed with its self-determination and emancipation, becomes exclusionary of other voices and other forms of belonging in Transylvania, including the Hungarians, the Germans, and the Roma. The question is how to deal with that in a broader context, and here comes the possibility of dialogues with the rich post-colonial and decolonial discussions out there. The optimism in which self-determination struggles are described with regards to sub-Saharan Africa and the global South in general can be tempered by the lessons of nationalism that we have witnessed in our region. But on the other hand, the tendency to idealize former empires can be refreshed a bit by understanding them also as a locus of imperial duress and some whole form of endurance in the minds of the elites, but also in forms of heritage. In this image, we see a bridge that was shaped in 2018 to actually solve the problem of the axis, and this bridge was erected just before the Centennial. The Centennial celebration brought together people coming from villages of Transylvania, as it happened in 1918, with another institutional top-down form of remembrance marked on military prowess and power. So this somehow was an echo of the citadel, which also through the heritage of war shows an imperial legacy that is also connected with the idea of power and subordination. Aside from the politics of memory and the politics of heritage exhibited in Alba Iulia, of course, there's the elephant in the room of the heritization and humanification of this heritage. When this becomes the engine of local development, the question is what other forms of citizen participation are sacrificed by actually seeing heritage as a way for economic growth. To sum up, we have seen in this story of Alba Iulia two forms of symbolic violence. First, this iconoclastic act of reshaping space through the demolition of the Western Gate in order to pinpoint the nation and move away from empire. And the second one, the way of actually reshaping it into a more faithful form of imperial heritage. But also what came to the forefront is the friction between the understanding of heritage as being just a technical, pragmatic and professional, non-political operation, as opposed to this understanding of this intentionality of architecture with regards to imperial duress, as we saw from the declaration of a number of key actors in the process itself. So we have seen also that the afterlives of empire are not only in the built environment, and not only in the persistence of the citadel, but also they do in the attitudes and yearnings of a cultural elite, transmitted to forms of communicative and cultural memory. And finally, we have pointed out some unsettling parallels between European post-imperial and global South post-colonial nation building. So in this idea of the symbolic violence of both national liberation and self-determination, but also of imperial nostalgia, is something to develop further and to engage more between all these discussions of imperial duress between our contexts for a more broader global and comparative understanding of memory and heritage.